recording to the cloud.
Thank you. Am I audible and is my screen visible, Dr. Nyman?
I beg your pardon?
Can you hear me and see my screen
yeah,
as well?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, first of all, good afternoon. And it's 22nd December 2025, 1 p.m. Central from Austin, Texas. It's a great opportunity today to present my doctoral dissertation. Thank you so much for all the participants across the globe who are joining from different time zones. And my dissertation's topic is Advancing Ethical Innovation in Human AI Collaboration, Trust and Legitimacy in Technology-Mediated Teams. The longer it sounds, I'm going to simplify it so that we get a technical conclusion out of this entire dissertation and some key takeaways from human resource development standpoint. I'm extremely thankful to my committee, led by Dr. Kim Ryman, who is my chair, Dr. Rochelle McWhorter, committee member, and Dr. Rob Carpenter, my mentor and committee member. A brief agenda of today's next 35 minutes presentation. I'll be kicking off this discussion with introduction and background, followed by the structure of my dissertation, how it follows multi-paper format, which is constituted of 4 papers, each indicated by chapter 3, 4, 5, and 6 respectively. So for rest of this conversation, I'll be referring to these chapters mostly as papers, just to avoid any confusion. So it's paper 1, 2, 3, and 4, which togetherly constitute my dissertation. And finally, I provide some implications for human resource development from theoretical and practical standpoint, and then I'll open the room for discussion for my committee members. As an introduction, AI and digital collaboration are now a part of our everyday's organizational work. I mean, of course, it's a part of our personal work, but I think it is more and more getting a part of our organizational work with tools like Microsoft Teams or other even all other tools which are used in smaller organizations. AI is getting embedded in not just as a digital assistant, but also in different facets of human resource development. It can be performance monitoring, performance development, learning and technology development, etc. But human resource development, though it acknowledges technology as an effective medium for teamwork, at the same time, it lacks understanding of how trust is formed. So the entire focus of my dissertation today is on trust. The discussion will be revolving on trust within a human and AI collaboration framework. The problem is trust in AI-mediated systems is fragile. Trust can easily break. Example, I mean, if we are using a chat GPT for some complex problem, it keeps on giving us consistently wrong answers. Of course, our trust breaks. But at the same time, though it's fragile, it can get repaired if we learn better prompt engineering, or if a new version or a new module gets launched, it can repair with time. So technologies do promise efficiency, but often produce or reproduce inequity. So trust varies not just due to technical failures, but due to variations in human elements. So human elements is the focus of my dissertation's topic from human resource development standpoint, because trust is inseparable from equity. If we have to have equitable systems, especially AI systems, we need to have people or employees trusting the AI system. And that's the reason trust is inseparable from equity. I'm taking this example of a visual. I mean, this is kind of a real life example. Let's say this women of color represented in this visual, her name is Sanika, and she's sitting in front of a screen and her performance is evaluated by an AI-driven employee performance insights. Now, Sanika comes from a background and she is a woman of color who is representing marginalized population over here. Her problem is like she takes time. She has some kind of self-awareness issues, or she takes time to express her opinions while she is digitally collaborating with her peers or in a teamwork. And though she is very expert in her job, she might be not the best in expressing it verbally, but her performance is actually very great on the back end. The other background of Sanika could be like she is a woman of color, but at the same time, she is recently a mother and just joined a workplace after 3 months of maternity leave. So she can't be on the Teams and virtual meeting all the time. Like she works offline, she needs some flexibility in her day-to-day schedule. So this is kind of background of a woman of color, which is represented by Sanika in this example. But unfortunately, the AI-driven employee performance chatbot, or this agent, it sees her visibility as low, her confidence as below average, and her engagement score is also marked to be less. And she is also determined to be not influencing her peers in the teamwork which she's doing. So where is the problem here? The problem, of course, is this AI-driven agent is not evaluating her performance the way it should be evaluating, because the fact which Sanika knows, her manager knows, the team knows is she is actually a high performer, but the AI agent or the AI performance tool is not assessing it in the best way and giving false results at the end of the day. So my story or the dissertation does not stop there. What I'm evaluating is how is trust impacted, which is my collective code of inquiry throughout this dissertation. How is trust impacted at different levels negatively? Will Sanika continue to trust this AI system? Will her peers, her manager, the other women of colors or other marginalized people in the company continue to trust this tool? The answer is no. And throughout this next 20-25 minutes, I'm going to discuss solutions or what all goes into this trust and how effectively this tool can adapt itself so that there can be better trust between human AI collaboration. Why to study trust in AI-mediated teams? Because at present, gaps exist in understanding who decides what to trust and whose trust matters. Of course, the AI agent example which we saw earlier, someone has trained that agent or tool to trust or to not trust. But whose trust matters? Someone who is more experienced with it or someone who is having more authority in the organization? So there's different levels of stakeholders involved in determining whose trust matters is going to be discussed in my dissertation. My dissertation advances human resource development's understanding of trust in AI-mediated teams, especially focusing on social inequities and legitimacy. For women of color, technocratic AI algorithms, the technology-driven AI algorithms can mask epistemic injustice, the injustice which has been there due to their different backgrounds forever, and digital stratification. Stratification refers to the divide or different layers which illustrates or shows a tension in human resource development between performance and justice. Performance needs to be evaluated, but at the same time, it needs to be just and fair. And that is an existing tension in human resource development, which my dissertation tries to solve. My dissertation establishes a unifying construct of socially legitimized trust, cohesively linking technical reliability, social legitimacy, and equitable participation. Throughout my dissertation, I use this term technology-mediated teams. With this visual, what I'm trying to communicate is technology-mediated teams is a collective term which represents some part or some component of virtual work in that. It can be completely 100% virtual. It can be partially virtual like a hybrid team environment, or it can be completely a human AI team environment. But as defined by Cascaccio and Montalegre and Johnson and Vera, technology-mediated teams is an umbrella term which captures all these three different environments. And the reason I introduced this term in my dissertation is the three different papers which are included in my dissertation. They cover all these three different environments to make a robust study offering a solution to human resource development. The format of my dissertation is multi-paper format. The first paper, which is indicated by chapter 2, 3, 4, and 5 in sequence. The first paper is a systematic literature review. The title is Role of Ethical and Trustworthy AI Teammates in Enhancing Team Performance. Paper 2 and Paper 3 are qualitative studies. Paper 2 focuses on women of color's digital inclusion and systemic barriers faced in hybrid teams. Paper 3 advances the study of taking the women of color study further to add intersectionality to that in virtual team environment. And the final paper offers a conceptual binding to introduce the construct of socially legitimized trust. The progression of these papers reflect a deliberate and evolving research trajectory. So they evolve and they progress on the previous paper's findings, wherein each paper go on amplifying and progressing the conceptual clarity, extending the relevance, and enriching the analytical framing of the central phenomenon discussed throughout this dissertation, trust in AI-mediated team. Some technical terms over here, which define my dissertation in terms of ontology and epistemology. What is ontology? Ontology is what is reality. From doctoral standpoint, I try to examine what exactly is reality, because reality is not fixed. It is shaped by people, technology, and institutions which are involved in AI-mediated environment. So I follow a socio-technical constructivist view of reality because I try to understand the lived experiences of the subjects involved through the lens of women of color who are participating in AI-mediated teamwork. Epistemology is knowing how do we know what is reality. We have to, questioning the existing knowledge and trying an interpretive stand to interpret the findings which I gather by learning from the experiences of women of color. And finally, following a critical lens, because there is critical HRD, critical human resources development branch involved in this, to understand what are the tensions existing in human resource development between innovation and justice. So the good thing about critical stance in my dissertation, using this critical lens, I focus on the tensions, and often focusing on tensions is a root cause for having innovations. So I find or explore through this
Yeah.
opportunities for
Yeah,
innovation.
but the yeah, so like the sys
Abhi, can you for a minute? I thought it's uh, methodology. The methodology which I use in my dissertation is multi-manuscript, and each of the manuscript focuses on different approaches like systematic literature review, qualitative, and conceptual. The advantage of multi-paper and using this mixed methodology, or not mixed methodology, but different approaches, is it gives a robust approach to strengthen the interpretive epistemology and theoretical contribution. Trust is the collective code of inquiry introducing a unifying thread of human and technological evolution in human research development. And it is a deliberate epistemological arc interrogated for scholarship to address the research gaps. So this visual over here represents how this arc or how the progression of these manuscripts goes on, progressing throughout this dissertation, and what each paper has to contribute towards my dissertation. Paper 1, which is indicated by chapter 2, it focuses on the technical trust, like what goes into having the trust, or how is the trust formed between human and AI in human AI collaboration. The next paper starts with investigating it from the human perspective or women of color standpoint to understand what are the barriers of digital access, skills, and participation, and how do they influence the trust of women of color working in hybrid environments, like technology-mediated teams. The next paper takes this discussion further to continue with the relational trust discussion, but also study it further from intersectional evidence. How does different layers of identities of women of color, it is not just gender, race, but something like motherhood or it belonging to different national identities. How do these different identities take these experiences further for women of color working in AI-mediated teams? And the final paper binds all these findings together to introduce a unified construct of socio-technical trust. The use of multidisciplinary lens to advance trust and technology in trust and legitimacy in AI-mediated teamworks, wherein women of color serve as contextual mirror and analytical lens to test whether AI systems are truly trustworthy. One point here which I would like to note in my dissertation is women of color is used as a contextual lens because, of course, everyone matters. I think it's just a representation of marginalized groups. For my doctoral dissertation, I've used that as an example or a contextual mirror or lens. But the findings which go back to the technology is a representation of all the marginalized groups. It can be related to disability. It can be related to any other underrepresentation which exist at present in different schemas or layers of society. But women of color, for this dissertation's purpose, they inform the studies through this contextual mirror and analytical lens. The purpose of my dissertation is to articulate an empirically ground and human resource development theory of socially legitimized trust using women of color's lived experiences. And the central research question throughout this dissertation is how can HRD create legitimate, ethical, and inclusive systems of trust in technology-mediated teams? The central focus remains on legitimacy in trust in AI-mediated teamworks. This dissertation is informed by three important theories: human AI teamwork, which provides a foundation of trust dynamics in team level interaction. The next theory is intersectionality and digital divide, which exposes inequities in how trust is distributed. And finally, legitimacy theory, which provides the system level explanation. How do these theories interplay? Because each of these theory, though they are studied in silos in different disciplines of research, but in my dissertation, there is an interplay of this theory, the interaction of these theories, which is explored. The first human HAIT framework, human AI team framework, it explores the role of trust. How is trust formed, and how does the trust operates in human AI collaboration? The finding is trust is technocratic in nature, and it stops there because it does not covers at all the human element or the social element in it, because it comes the root of HAIT, or the HAIT is one of the major foundations on the technical side or the computer science or the technology side. So since my dissertation follows a multidisciplinary lens, HAIT frameworks forms a major study, a major theoretical framework with which I start my dissertation. The next theoretical framework is digital divide theory, which focuses more on the access, skills, and outcomes of how these three different things influence the trust and participation in human AI collaboration. The third theory is intersectionality theory. Intersectionality refers to the different layers of identities. For example, gender of an employee, the race of an employee, the age, the national origin, etc. So how does intersectionality theory comes into picture is by answering who is affected, who all individuals can get affected while participating in human AI mediated teamwork. And these frameworks or these theories together operate as an interactive scaffold for my dissertation. Each of these theories in silos or when considered individually, there is an instability or gaps which are involved. For example, in this Venn diagram, what I'm trying to represent is human AI teaming in paper, which is discussed in paper 1. It discusses trust. It lays the foundation of trust for my dissertation, but it completely misses on the social element. I mean, of course, if there is human and AI involved and trust is involved, it completely misses on the part of the trust which is involved from the human perspective or human side. And since my focus is on human resource development, in the consecutive next papers, paper 2, 3, and 4, I focus from the digital divide theory standpoint and intersectionality theory standpoint. The digital divide theory focuses more on how digital bias persists even after the access is granted. It's not just restricting to access, but even if access is granted, there is still digital divide. So in the next paper, I follow intersectionality theory because what I find there is different identities or layers of identities which come into play. For example, the race to which the employee belongs to, or what is their age, or what is their national origin. And each of these theories fail to address the unique human dynamics introduced by the integration. And currently, the collective interaction and potential of these theories is unexplored. So my dissertation tries to explore all these three different theories in integration and integrative and combination lens to specifically offer the understanding and provide a novel approach towards this entire study. Explicit operationalization of concepts in papers. Throughout the series of my papers, intersectionality, digital divide, and human AI frameworks complement, challenge, or extend each other. Each paper incrementally builds on preceding ones, cumulatively contributing to a broader theoretical understanding. An example is how identity adds to access issues faced by women of color in AI integrated teams. Because though the women of color, which is like focus in my dissertation, though access issues are solved, they were still facing some problems. And because it was not just related to access or the skill sets for accessing the technology, it is because other factors involved, like the psychological safety, or they feeling insecure because of their socioeconomic background. So there were different layers of identities which were involved. And this enhanced perspective advances the overall theoretical contribution across the multi-paper format dissertation, which eventually adds rigor and coherence to my doctoral dissertation. Now I discuss the three different levels of this theoretical operationalization in my dissertation: micro, meso, and macro. Micro is something which operates at individual level, the trust which operates at individual level for an employee. Meso is the trust which operates at team level in an employee, and macro is the trust which operates at the organizational level in an employee. I use multiple levels or multi-level framework in my dissertation because considering an example of women of color working in an AI-mediated teamwork environment, it's not just at the women of color's level. The trust is involved. I mean, how trustworthy she feels about the entire AI-mediated teamwork. And then how does the team looks at it? What are the team norms of interpreting her performance from the team standpoint? And finally, how is the algorithm set at the institutional level? How does the organization decides that how her performance needs to be evaluated? So in summary, the trust operates not just at the individual level, it travels across these different levels of micro, meso, and macro, individual, team level, and the institutional level, and which makes my dissertation not just a collection of studies, but it is a coherent socio-technical theory. In this slide, I try to explain this different multi-level framework which operates to each of my papers. The first paper, the Human AI Teaming Systematic Literature Review, it operates at micro as well as meso level. Micro because how trust is formed, the trust is formed at an individual level, but also meso because I'm discussing human AI collaboration or teamwork. So trust operates both at individual level as well as at the team level. In the next paper, the trust operates at meso as well as macro level. Meso because it discusses at the team level how team level participation of women of color gets impacted based on her skill sets, her access, etc. but also at the macro level, because ultimately it's the organization which is evaluating her performance. In the third paper, Intersection Lived Experiences, it is more focused on the micro level. Micro because the women of color is facing challenges because of their own identities. It can be related to their national origin, their age, their matrescence, or any other identities, but it's more focusing on micro or individual levels. And ultimately, my final paper, which is the conceptual framework or binding or unifying paper, it operates at macro level because I offer a solution which is organizational wide, offering from the HRD standpoint. Research stream connectivity and cumulative knowledge building. The insights gained from exploration of ethical AI design, paper 1, inform, shape, or refine the subsequent analysis of systemic digital inequities in paper 2 and lived experiences in paper 3. Each chapter advances over the theoretical understanding and offers a cohesive conceptual framework in the final paper, advancing the phenomenon of interest of trust in AI-mediated teams, and ultimately offering scholarly and theoretical implications for human resource development. The current status of my papers, which are a part of my dissertation, as on today, the first paper, the solo paper, which is on ethical and trustworthy AI teammates team performance, it's already published in Performance Improvement Quarterly in December 2024. Second paper is an empirical qualitative study for which I had collaborated with Dr. McWhorter and Dr. Carpenter. I had the opportunity to be a first author on that. And it is presently in press with New Horizons in Education and Human Resource Development. Happy to say that the first online version will be available on 3rd January 2026. The next paper, empirical qualitative paper, for which again I had the opportunity to be the first author. It's focusing on digital inclusion and systemic barriers. It's published in International Journal of Integrating Technology in Education in March 2025. And the final paper, which is the conceptual binding, I had the opportunity to be its first author again. It's titled Legitimizing Trust in Technology, a Socio-Technical Framework for Human Resource Development. It's accepted for the upcoming conference of Academy of Human Resource Development next month in Dallas. And it's also under review for our UT Dallas A-list journal, Business Ethics Quarterly. This is a quick snippet of how the first paper looks like. The purpose is to examine the human AI teaming dynamics, focusing on the role of ethical and trustworthy AI teammates in shaping equitable and inclusive team climates. Now, though this first paper, the SLR, is focusing on human AI team frameworks, and it does not directly comment on women of colors, the importance or the significance of this SLR is it lays the foundation of trust for this entire dissertation and shows how trust is important from social standpoint or the human standpoint, which informs my next papers. A quick overview of what all was involved in the systematic literature review. There were, as we see, like almost 2,000 studies which were involved in this screening, ultimately leading to 35 studies, which informed the entire findings of my this particular paper. The key findings of this particular paper was, first, ethically designed AI teammates promote transparency, psychological safety, and trust. And trust breaches, as I discussed earlier, trust is fragile. So trust can be breached easily because of opacity or errors. But trust, even though it is broken or even if it is fragile, over the period it can be resolved using repair mechanisms like explanations or updates in technology. The key insight from this paper is the technical excellence is necessary, but it's not sufficient. Algorithm cannot be perfect without involving the human element in human AI collaboration. And it lays the foundation of need to investigate the trust, as without legitimacy, the adoption of technology is weak. Legitimacy refers to authorization. Who decides what is legit and who authorizes what trust is correct, is right or valid or invalid. The next paper is a qualitative study of digital inclusion and systemic barriers, the role of technology in shaping participation of women of color in hybrid workspaces. This is a quick snippet of the participants which were involved in my studies. As we see on this slide, the participants, women of color belonging to different ethnicities and race, and also it's a good mix of different nationalities, different age groups. Most of these participants were belonging to a higher education background, and they also represent different industries. I am representing here some actual verbatims from the study to show what I found or what were the key findings while I interviewed these participants as outcome of the study. One of the participants, while saying about digital access challenge, they said there was an assumption that everyone working remotely had a perfect setup at home, but I had to work from kitchen table with slow Wi-Fi, while my colleagues had dedicated home offices. That difference impacts how you engage. So this is a digital access challenge which one of the participants voiced because they came from a socio-economic background which did not have the luxury of offering a well-established home office or a high-speed internet connection. Another participant said that they always had to go an extra mile. I have to go an extra mile, especially because I'm the only Black person on my team, the only Black women. The third participant said the benefit of technology in collaboration. So they also had some positive things to say about technology. They said that before hybrid work, I wasn't even in room where decisions were made. Now, at least I get to be on the Zoom call and I'm reflecting in the list of attendees. Whether or not I'm heard or not is a different story, but technology did put me in there. So they also shared their positive experience of having technology in the teamwork. The key findings from this second paper was it documents digital divide because there are three levels or three layers of accesses. First is access, the challenges which they face in accessing the technology. Next is what skills do they need to access the technology? And finally, how is the participation or outcome impacted because of all the three different factors involved in it? And finally, it impacts the visibility, credibility, and promotion of women of color while participating in this technology-mediated teams. It also shows how algorithmic biases and surveillance effects. It negatively impacts the legitimate participation and influences the trust negatively in AI-mediated teamworks. The key insight from this paper was it frames digital participation as social legitimized trust in practice. This is a practical example of how who determines what to trust impacts the actual employee in an organization, especially if it's a marginalized employee depicted by women of color. The last empirical paper which I have is Virtual Work Challenges and Resilience and Intersectional Experience of Women of Color, intersectional exploration of team experiences of women of color. Some verbatims or the findings out of this study were the women of color had to assert presence while working in virtual team environment by saying that there was a challenge where it was often like if you have ideas, but you are thinking twice, thrice in your mind, whether you want to speak up or not. So I'll like to draw your attention back to the vignette, which I started my presentation with. The Sanika, who was representing women of color in that vignette, they were a high performer, but they were facing challenges to express what they wanted to say because of the not having the psychological safety or having some barriers before of expressing themselves. So it was motivated by this actual verbatim which I got from this study. The next verbatim is showing resilience because this study also provides the strategies of how to offer solutions when the women of color face challenges. This particular participant says the importance of mentoring and networking because they say that women of color is so rare in certain industries, but especially it's just like that in corporate America. This participant was highlighting the importance of networks like Hispanic women in technology or Black women in technology. So importance of having these groups, mentoring and peer networking and supports to empower the fellow marginalized communities. And finally, interplay of gender, race, and national origin. This participant had to say that they have been in the United States for over past 10 years, but being an immigrant in a foreign country, you get conditioned to live in a way that you're not always visible to a lot of people. They are used to being ignored by the people because they always live in constant fear. They don't want to attract any negative attention because there can be any consequences to that. The key findings from this paper were it shifts the focus from structural constraints to individual agency. Trust is not just restricted to access. It is also dependent on the identities or the layers of intersectionality involved. And women of color also offer resilience as strategies because resilience is developmental. They find ways to overcome the barriers which they are offering, which they faced. And they offer strategies to reshape these inequitable systems to make them better. And finally, the good thing about this paper is it informs, or the findings informed back the first paper, which was a systematic literature review focusing on human AI collaboration. So finally, this paper offers findings from this empirical study or actual lived experiences. And these findings go back to the first paper of how to enhance the trust in human AI teamwork and collaboration. And the key insight is trust endures via reflexive agency and relational learning, not just via flawless systems. The final paper is a conceptual paper. It binds the findings and the learnings from all the previous three papers. The different kinds of trust which is indicated in this conceptual framework. First is technocratic trust. Technocratic trust is purely technical trust, which is there in human AI collaboration. It discusses risk, reliability, factors like explainability while working in human AI collaboration. But the next important trust is relational trust, also social trust. Like how does an employee trust an AI algorithm? Whether it's credibility, the voice of an employee, the psychological safety of an employee, which gets involved in building that trust. And finally, institutional trust, because even if an employee determines, or even if employees trust says something, it's finally the organization or the institutional level which determines the overall kind of conclusion, like what is correct, or what needs to be trusted, or what needs not be trusted. So it's institutional, which is also getting involved. Again, going back to micro, meso, macro level, it's multi-level framework. And finally, reservoir through a newly innovative construct which my dissertation offers, named Socially Legitimized Trust in Human Resource Development. It offers appropriate reliance, and it also says that trust can be repaired over time. Trust is a developmental construct. Even though it is broken at these different levels, it can be repaired over the period of time, taking findings back from the human element. These are some technical definitions, which I already covered in the previous slide, but it says, or it defines the different constructs or different types of trust involved. The key findings from the final paper, the conceptual paper, is it defines trust as credible when technocratic reliability, social or relational credibility, and institutional authorization align. All three need to work together to have a socially legitimized trust framework working together. And it integrates legitimacy theory, epistemic justice, digital divide into an HRD model of socially legitimized trust. And the key insight is it positions human resource development as a developmental steward of governance, learning, participatory design, and transparent oversight. Well, it's an honor to share that the findings of this final conceptual paper were found to be useful and applicable by Sandia National Labs, United States. So today I'm happy to have Dr. Reed Milwitz, who is a senior scientist at Sandia National Labs, who used this conceptual framework by saying that Sanket's conceptual framework for legitimized trust was instrumental in this work and helped to clarify several different threads of inquiry around trust dynamics and high consequence application systems. And the fact that we were able to apply this framework to diverse problem spaces says his research and thesis is well grounded. So this paper, which is more focused from the technical standpoint, taking findings from my socially legitimized trust, has been recently submitted to Chase conference. It is under review, and the conference is scheduled next quarter in Brazil. I'm coming back to the vignette with which I started my example, this entire presentation. If we observe in this image, Sanika looks to be a little bit finally happy, because here what is seen is the construct of socially legitimized trust. Here different layers of trust are getting interplaying. There is technical trust which is involved. Sanika believes that the algorithm design is transparent, it is explainable, it is trustworthy, transparent and reliable metrics are seen. There is structural access and capability, because her visibility and participation is acknowledged. Who is measured and how is measured is known. It is transparent. Finally, relational trust. She feels a little bit more psychologically safe and feels her ideas are acknowledged. And institutional legitimacy. The organization in which Sanika works, it focuses on governance and fairness. And it also gives importance on whose knowledge counts, ultimately leading a higher trust, which is my collective code of inquiry from human resource development standpoint. Implications from HRD theory. My dissertation offers an integration of three different theories: intersectionality, digital divide, and HRIT. I purposely use the word transdisciplinary contribution, not just multidisciplinary. It is definitely multidisciplinary, bringing across engineering fields, social fields, but now it's transdisciplinary because it takes the contribution further and advances the knowledge. It offers a conceptual innovation by introducing the term socially legitimized trust as a representation of voice, inclusion, and accountability. And there is also empirical contribution, because I have two qualitative studies in my dissertation and also a systematic literature review, which follows a very stringent PRISMA framework. Implications for practice. The design and development, while the HRD professionals do a design and development of human AI-mediated algorithms, inclusive employee input and participatory reviews are very important to ensure transparency, explainability, and bias mitigation. In training and development, trust calibration is very important. And of course, the human resource development employees, managers, leaders, they need to upskill themselves so that they can ensure equitable adoption of these systems. And leadership development should also focus on digital ethics and ensuring that they are justice. It's justice-based systems. And finally, enablement and empowerment, structured turn-taking, mentorship networks to enhance visibility, and psychological safety facilitation is very important for the marginalized groups. And from AI governance standpoint, ethics audits, inclusive design standards need to be in place. My study also has limitations. The data, more the merrier. I wish I could have had more data, but the study never stops. I would love to explore this research beyond United States. My dissertation was focusing on women of color participants, particularly working in the United States. There can be additional layers of employee identities from intersectionality theory, which can be explored. I'm already working on a study of motherhood of women of color. Like, how does an additional layer of mothers or motherhood changes the entire interplay of participation of women of color in virtual mediated teams? There is scope of comparative studies between different geographies or different environments or different demographics. A comparative study can be done. And the conceptual model, which is introduced in my final paper, can be tested empirically. And finally, the trust, which is formed, eroded, and repaired, the mechanism always keeps on evolving. So this study needs to evolve timely, and it needs to continue over the period of time. The key takeaways in summary to my dissertation: trust is a collective code of inquiry for this entire dissertation. Women of color are contextual lens, a representation of marginalized groups, but the study, every voice matters. This study goes back to the findings of AI-mediated teams of how the algorithms can be better, and there can be a better collaboration between human and AI. It reframes trust as a developmental mechanism that organizations can design, assess, and improve. And it positions human resource development as an architect of trustworthy social technical systems. Finally, it aligns performance and equity in AI-mediated teams. They are not two different things. Performance and equity go hand in hand, and they cannot be treated separately from HRD standpoint. These are some key references which were used in my dissertation. And next, I open the floor for discussion for my committee. Thank you.
Sanket, thank you very much. A very nice presentation. If you want to close off your presentation, that would be fine. And if you have water near you, maybe take a sip of water and just take a minute to take a breath. Dr. Carpenter, I'll ask you to start with comments and questions.
Sure. Sanket, good job. Proud of you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. First, I'll start with a comment on reading your dissertation. I think you articulated it well here in the presentation. I'd like to see a little bit better of a boundary statement around socially legitimized trust in the opening of your dissertation. And, how does that, and really what does that mean operationally, a little bit better in the conclusion? Those are just some minor points, I think, from just the written part that I read, but I think you articulated that better here. Maybe just tighten that up in the dissertation.
Yes, sir.
One thing that triggered me on one of your slides was you brought in psychological safety, and it made me think about how is SLT, different from adjacent constructs like psychological safety or organizational justice or social capital, for example. How do you see it different?
Thank you for that question, Dr. Carpenter. I think socially legitimized trust is an umbrella term. It does include all these factors like psychological safety or justice, but the good thing about socially legitimized trust, it considers all these three different factors, not just at an employee's level, but also the next level, like not just social or relational level, but also at the institutional level, like how an organization or how the workplace needs to consider these things into practice, so that it authorizes that this trust is right, like whether to trust a system or not. While deciding, it's finally the organization or that higher power which is determining whether the algorithm is valid or not. So that factor also goes into consideration. Though it starts with the discussion of psychological safety of employees, that is the foundation of this entire discussion. But ultimately, the organization also needs to trust it in both directions. It needs to trust its employees that employees' voice matter, employees' psychological safety matters, and then it needs to validate those algorithms from the governance standpoint, so that can be actually implemented at organizational level. So to answer your question, socially legitimized trust can be seen as an umbrella term, which also factors in this things like psychological safety or intersectionality of women of color or any other identities.
And I think it's important maybe to codify this a little bit better, that it also captures different levels of analysis. And so if you start talking about psychological safety as an individual level analysis, and then organizational justice as a different level of analysis, SLT is performative here at different levels of analysis. So I think that's important as well. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree with that. And I would incorporate it as I revise my dissertation in the final point.
So another question here, and we'll go to a different topic, and I think it's important to hit on is, why the contextual lens of women of color? Why do you think that was important to draw up the phenomenon towards SLT?
Because I think since it's a doctoral dissertation, I have to focus on one representation or, from the microscopic lens, and women of color offer a representation of marginalized group. So often the underrepresented voices get ignored. And from the SLT's phenomenon or phenomenon of interest of trust, which is my collective code of inquiry for this entire dissertation, how I connect it is women of color offer it as a representation of any marginalized group. Of course, there can be the future scope of my study can be other marginalized groups like disability and inclusion of them, or other facets in the society from socio-economic background or different geographies or geopolitical backgrounds. But women of color is a starting point, and they offer a lens or a representation of marginalized group. And then every voice matters when we discuss or think from the SLT standpoint, socially legitimized trust standpoint. Ultimately, to sum up my answer, I would say that every voice of any marginalized population should be considered, while an institution or organization determines whether an algorithm needs to be trusted or not. So women of color is a representation of the larger group, but in short, an organization needs to consider any such voice, even if it's less in number, while it determines whether an algorithm is trustworthy or not.
Okay, last question. How did the choice of women of color sharpen your HRD implications specifically?
Critical HRD is a very strong branch, and there is great work which is already done in human resource development. So I think from position, this is a oftenly asked question, like from researchers' positionality standpoint, like I can relate myself being a person of color to different challenges which a person of color or any marginalized person of any marginalized identity faces in their day-to-day work challenges. So I think that was my personal motivation or kind of positionality. But from HRD standpoint, I think, since critical HRD is an established field, but not explored much from the multidisciplinary lens, it enhances or enriches further the knowledge in human resource development because it really makes that study multidisciplinary. It expands beyond HRD, and then it also looks into the other knowledge in, from engineering lens or the technical lens or HCI standpoint, and brings knowledge excerpts from all these different branches into human resource development to enrich and enhance the HRD's knowledge further.
Very good, Sanket. Thank you. That's all my questions, Dr. Nam.
Thank you, sir.
Dr. McWhorter, comments, questions?
Sure. I have 3 questions for you, Sanket. The first is, I thought your writing about human AI teams challenging notions of leadership and followership were interesting. Tell me more about how or why AI reproduces structural inequities embedded in the data. I think that was on page 11 of your manuscript.
So structural inequities or barriers, it can start right from, it can be at different levels. It can be related to socio-economic background. It can be simply skill sets. For example, someone who has never had an access to a computer until they were maybe 15, 17-year-old, naturally their ease or comfort of using the technology would be different from someone who has been playing with tabs right since they were 5-year-old. So that is one example of digital stratification or layering or divide which exists in the society around us. But for women of color, all these different factors come into play. Like what my digital divide theory discusses is there are access challenges, there is skill set challenges, and all these different challenges finally determine their participation and results of how their performance is evaluated. So to your question, the stratification or layering or the data, how it is impacted is because there are so many different challenges at different levels. It can be related to skill sets, it can be related to socio-economic background, other backgrounds like the intersectionality or their identities coming into picture. And that is the reason this stratification impacts their participation.
Great, thank you. My second question is kind of long, so you have to listen. You noted in your dissertation that Catalyst 2020 found that only a small fraction of executive level roles in the U.S. were held by women of color. I dug a little deeper. I located a more recent report authored by McKinsey and Company, along with the Lean In organization that was published in 2024. The authors noted that although over the past decade, women have made gains in the workplace, they concluded that in senior leadership, progress for women in the corporate pipeline are at risk, especially for women of color. Based on your research, do you agree that this is likely the case?
Absolutely. I think I was also fortunate to interview some of the senior leaders, working in different environments, could be healthcare, higher education, but those were their experiences. I mean, what I learned from their findings was like they had to struggle twice hard, thrice hard in comparison to someone who is of a majority background. So to your question, yes, that was an empirical finding, also an observation which was learned while I interviewed my participants. But I think that is a fact. I mean, thank you for sharing the study from McKinsey. But though we may be, progressing in that direction, but there is a long way to go. And I mean, the recent study still says that there are challenges, and we need to resolve those challenges in future.
Great, thank you. And the last question is, I appreciated that you utilize verbatim quotes from your participants to illustrate your themes in your study. Is there a particular participant quote that stood out for you? And if so, why did it stand out?
Well, this is slightly an emotional question because, as I mentioned about my positionality, though, I'm not 100% representative of, since I'm a person of color, I can relate to certain experiences. One woman of color, while they mentioned that, imagine a conference room or a meeting room, and they were asked to just write on the board just because other people, or they were mentioning to the other genders, like, it was a male oriented or male dominated, team or the meeting room. And they said that they were women of color, and those majority, people belonging to majority race and males, they would request her to again go and write on the board again and again, just because they wanted to see her back. And I mean, since English is not my first language, it took a while for me to understand what she meant. But when it hit me, I realized that what she referred was, it was also a sexual kind of harassment which was going on there. They wanted to see her backside, and because of that, because she was a woman of color, they were again like someone asking her to bring coffee, someone making women of color to go and write on the board just to see the rear side of her. That was like that was really touching, and it shook me for a minute. And I know as a researcher, I should be staying away from the subject sentiment. I tried my best, but these are some findings which I will, which impact me for the rest of my life. These problems are real. And just the methods or modes differ in person and virtual or AI mediated collaboration, but the problems are real, and that participant did share her actual real life challenge with me.
Thank you. Appreciate that explanation.
Of course.
Rob, any other questions come to mind in that conversation with Rochelle? All right. Sanket, I'm curious how you are going to go about your work life with the knowledge that you've gained through this dissertation. What are you going to do different? What are you going to do the same?
Well, great question. I think I'll call myself a scholar practitioner because I have been into HR analytics and data space for almost 13 years now. Today, I'm honored to have all my existing workplace leaders from Centra Health joining me, also from my previous organizations. We have Kimara, who was my ex-CHRO. We have Brittany, who is another senior leader from Alternative Behavior Strategies. So I think in my future, I'm going to very closely interact. I'm already interacting with AI in my day-to-day life, and it's going to go on and it's going to get more intimate. But as I do that, one thing which I learned from my own dissertation is every voice matters. Do not overlook anyone. And there may be things which you can't even imagine sometimes, like you might have just overlooked, not intentionally, but I was just not aware. Like until I did this dissertation, I myself was never aware of these all challenges which exist in real world. So it will make me more vigilant a little bit more sensitive to understand, or at least give an effort to to know what's all around me and who all needs to be taken into consideration before making any challenges which happen, not challenges, changes which happens at the organization level. Going back to Dr. Carpenter's question of SLT, socially legitimized theory, ultimately the trust in the system is going to be determined by my organization. Someone who is sitting at the top is going to determine that. But my job in my practice would be letting them know that, hey, should we also look at this particular identity, or this maybe veterans, or maybe something else, or any other identity or representation. So considering their perspectives or their standpoints will be very important as I enhance my engagement with AI technologies in future.
All right, very good. And I'd like to hear about your view of research. And since you, if you think about the time when you entered the program, how has your view of research changed, if any? And if so, if it has changed, what were some of the milestone markers along the way that instigated that change?
Well, I think research is such a huge world that you cannot be an expert, or at least I feel that this is just a beginning, though I hope today is a milestone day for me. But at the same time, I feel that this is just a beginning, because so many different methodologies. We have Dr. Turner here, who leads a SIG in itself for methodology. He's a methodologist. He has helped me throughout. But there are so many different methods, even in qualitative, quantitative, mixed, and it never goes on ending. Methodologies are always evolving. And Dr. Carpenter always taught one thing in his mentorship, that pick a theory and stick to it, or pick a method and stick to it. So I think what I personally learned is sticking and not giving up anytime soon. And also I think getting published is an important acknowledgement through this important, very stringent process. So when I chose multi-paper format, I knew that I was choosing a difficult way, or maybe not a straight road to success. But I chose it intentionally because I get distracted very soon and get bored if I keep doing the same things for 4, 5, 6 years. So one thing I chose intentionally because it also gave me satisfaction at different milestones. Okay, my one paper got published. Second, third is in pipeline. So it kept me motivating at different levels. And I think it just worked out with right team support and mentoring from all these wonderful people on the call today.
And my last question is, what did you do to work on your writing skills?
Well, my writing is not the best. I admit it. I have Sarah Norrell, who is helping me professionally to get better at it. She's on the call today. But at the same time, I think I also intentionally chose the position of Associate Editor of Performance Improvement Quarterly Journal. Blessed to have Dr. Carlos Vieira, who is my editor-in-chief for that journal today. I chose that role because I'm learning from other people's writing, and more and more good quality work I read, I realize my own mistakes and how I can get better. So I think that is a good way to get better and understand my own blind spots, and I'll keep working on it. Thank you.
Very good. All right. Well, committee, if you don't have any other questions, then we are going to retire to a breakout room, and then audience, if you would want to keep Sanket company, that would be great, and we will come back.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Nyman.